Fast, strong, flesh-eating zombies infected with the iconic T-virus. Red, raw lickers, with their exposed brains, sharp teeth, and long, whipping tongues. Undead sharks. Secret labs on sinister islands. Rocket launchers and bullets flying. Decades of bizarre, complicated lore to sift through. It can only be Resident Evil, baby! On February 2, 2023, Sony Pictures Home Entertainment announced the next animated film in the Resident Evil universe, Resident Evil Death Island. Scheduled for release in July 2023, the film's announcement came with an action-packed trailer that gave fans more to sink their teeth into than a freshly infected zombie in Raccoon City. Taking place between the events of Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, the film follows Leon S. Kennedy, Chris Redfield, and more of the franchise's most beloved characters as they take on a threat on one of the most infamous prison islands of all time, Alcatraz. Once the home of serial killers, hardened robbers, and even the legendary gangster Al Capone, and now home to things that are a whole lot deadlier. According to IGN, the basic premise of the film's story is D.S.O. agent Leon S. Kennedy is on a mission to rescue Dr. Antonio Taylor from kidnappers when a mysterious woman thwarts his pursuit. Meanwhile, B.S.A.A. agent Chris Redfield is investigating a zombie outbreak in San Francisco, where the cause of the infection cannot be identified. The only thing the victims have in common is that they all visited Alcatraz Island recently. Following that clue, Chris and his team head to the island, where a new horror awaits them. But as is often the case with Resident Evil, there's way more to it than just that. Chris and Leon will be there, sure, but those are not the only familiar faces on screen. Former STARS members Jill Valentine and Rebecca Chambers will be getting in on the action, as well as Chris's sister Claire Redfield. As soon as the trailer dropped, eagle-eyed Resident Evil fans began picking apart every shot and taking note of all the little details hidden within, anything that might hint at what's to come. There's a lot to look forward to, from the reappearance of fan-favorite heroes to bombastic fight scenes to bigger, badder threats than ever seen before. The Resident Evil franchise knows evil scientists like the back of its own T-virus-infected hand. From Resident Evil 2's megalomaniacal William Birkin to Resident Evil 8's cultish Mother Miranda, and it looks like this upcoming introduces another corrupt doctor in the form of Dr. Antonio Taylor. The February trailer introduced Dr. Taylor as the subject of Leon's latest assignment, a rescue mission to save the doctor following his kidnapping and possible transport to Alcatraz Island. The latest trailer peels back a few of the layers of the mystique around the doctor, revealing that he was at least partially responsible for creating the latest zombie virus. Whether Dr. Taylor will turn out to be friend or foe remains to be seen, but we can't wait to find out. Speaking of evil scientists, there are none in the franchise quite as famous as Dr. Albert Wesker. If his slicked back hair and trademark sunglasses didn't make it clear enough already, Wesker is nothing but trouble. And this is not just because of his T-virus mutations. This bad boy of virology has been a test subject in Project W, a project intended to develop a new, genetically superior race of human beings. If that sounds like some supervillain nonsense, that's because it is. Following Project W, he worked on the T-virus project and was a huge driving force in the Umbrella Corporation's research. That is, until he left the corporate life behind for a career as a spy and worked in the United States Army. Wesker was most recently seen in Resident Evil 5, where he faced off against Chris Redfield in West Africa. There, Chris discovered his old partner Jill Valentine was still alive and working for Wesker. However, she wasn't exactly herself while she was doing this. She was brainwashed, equipped with a device on her chest that gave Wesker control over her. Still, being forced to attack your old partner by a mutant megalomaniac isn't the sort of thing you just get over, and the trailer for Death Island makes that clear. It opens with a conversation between Chris and Rebecca Chambers, who discuss the fact that Jill still blames herself for what happened back in Resident Evil 5. It's likely that Jill's trauma and lingering sense of guilt will play a major role in her character arc in Death Island. Wesker may be dead, but the impact of his actions persists, much like a shambling corpse kept animated by a mutated virus. Over the course of the games, the story has gone to some wild places, but one of the wildest places of all is the one where it all began, Raccoon City, where the events of the first ever Resident Evil game took place. In the time at which Death Island is set, Raccoon City is long gone, having been nuked during the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3. But it looks like the city is still going to play a role in the action of Death Island. When the trailer introduces the apparent big bad of the game, the bioterrorist that Jill addresses as Dylan, probably because that's his name, the audience is treated to a quick flashback to the Raccoon City incident of 1998. In the flashback sequence, Umbrella Corp officers enter Raccoon City walking past the signature welcome sign before encountering a swarm of infected. Dylan hides from the action, and apparently that strategy allowed him to make it out of the city alive. Whatever Dylan is up to now, it started back in Raccoon City, and it's likely that the film will feature more flashbacks to that fateful time in 1998. So, who is this Dylan guy? What's his deal? Why does Jill know him? That much is still unclear, but one thing is for sure, he's somehow been involved with the chaos surrounding the virus for as long as Jill and Chris have. Resident Evil Death Island also sees the return of everybody's favorite swoopy-haired D.S.O officer Leon S. Kennedy. Leon's been through a lot, from his survival of the Raccoon City destruction incident to virus outbreak after devastating virus outbreak. But through it all, he's never lost his fighting spirit or his ability to perform awesome action hero stunts. Who could forget his motorcycle ride in Resident Evil Vendetta, with its killer dogs, exploding cars, and impressive firearm-based maneuvers? Leon's at the top of his game in this trailer, dodging cars on his motorcycle in a high-speed chase through a tunnel and driving a military truck, while Chris supplies the firepower in the form of a machine gun on the back. John Wick eats your heart out, just like a T-virus-infected zombie would. Fans of the games may not recognize Maria Gomez from her appearance in the trailer, but fans of the animated films would know that face anywhere. Maria appeared as one of the antagonists of Resident Evil Vendetta. She worked as a bioterrorist and bodyguard for former CIA agent Glenn Arias, alongside her father Diego. On the day of Glenn's wedding, the United States government ordered a drone strike that killed most of the people in attendance. Maria managed to survive, though she lost the use of her right eye. As you might imagine, this incident left her with a bit of a chip on her shoulder. Maria and her father aided Glenn in his quest for revenge, helping him spread a dormant form of the A virus through contaminated bottles of water. Chris Redfield confronted the trio in Mexico, but was unable to stop them before Maria conducted an attack on Rebecca Chambers' lab at the Alexander Institute of Biotechnology. However, Rebecca managed to survive, in spite of Arias' attempting to make her his wife and infect her with the A virus. Chris saved her, but was forced to contend with an even greater threat when Diego merged with Arias, forming a powerful tyrant. It seemed as if Chris would not be able to take on the tyrant on his own, but thankfully Leon arrived to join the fight, along with DC and Nadia. Together, they defeated the tyrant and thwarted Arias' plan, leaving Diego and Arias both dead. But Maria survived to carry on her father's legacy, and that chip on her shoulder grew even larger as she started cooking up a plan for vengeance. Now it seems that Maria's plan for revenge has come to fruition, because she's coming back in Death Island to confront Leon, Chris, and the rest of those she deems responsible for her father's death. She can be spotted in the trailer throwing a chair at Leon and is confirmed to be working with Dylan toward whatever nefarious scheme he has in store. However, Maria's plans to get her revenge remains to be seen, but knowing her past history of ruthlessness and willingness to engage in biological warfare, it's not going to be pretty. Speaking of things that aren't pretty, there are quite a few nasty creatures in the Resident Evil universe. There are the zombie Dobermans from the first ever Resident Evil game, who happen to be responsible for one of the most iconic jump scares in video game history. With their heightened speed, strength, and infected bodies, their bite is definitely worse than their bark. There are the infected flesh-eating crows, the enormous tyrants, and the classic George A. Romero-style zombies that have defined Resident Evil since the very first game. Then there are the Lickers. Lickers are right out of a nightmare, characterized by their exposed, distended brains, lack of any skin or eyes, sensitivity to sound, and of course their tongues. The tongues that give them their name are large, covered with sharp barbs, and able to pierce flesh, making them a lethal enemy for players since the late 90s. The Lickers are back yet again to wreak more havoc on Death Island. The trailer depicts them in a new, even more terrifying form. If you thought the Lickers were horrible before, wait until you get a look at them with gills. That's right, now they can survive underwater, making them a perfect threat for a story set primarily on an island. In addition to the Lickers, there are also T-virus mutated sharks swimming all around the island, ready to swallow victims whole or tear them to shreds. There will almost certainly be more infected sea creatures in the final film, and who knows what terrifying forms they'll take. Jill Valentine has been through a lot since her first encounter with the T-virus outbreak in Raccoon City. This special operations agent of the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance has dedicated herself to eradicating bioterrorism and taking on the horrors created by the Umbrella Corporation. After the destruction of Raccoon City, she worked with Chris Redfield and carried on their work until her apparent death. Of course, we now know that she didn't die but was used as a puppet by Wesker. She was eventually freed from Wesker's control and was able to recover, but she wasn't about to retire to a quiet life in the countryside. She resumed her career and rejoined the battle against bioterrorism. Though it looks like she isn't exactly living a peaceful life in Death Island, she's going to get the chance to be an absolute badass. She'll be taking on zombies with combat prowess that's nothing short of awesome, taking on the infected undead with guns, knives, and her bare hands. So far, Jill Valentine and Leon Kennedy have never met on screen outside of non-canonical games like Fortnite and Dead by Daylight, but it looks like that's all about to change. Leon doesn't seem to start the film with the rest of the cast, but eventually his mission takes him to Alcatraz, where he encounters Jill Valentine. And how do the two respond with this historic meeting? With a knife fight, of course. They don't get to fight for long before the aforementioned evolved lickers attack and cut things short. This might be the first time Leon and Jill officially meet, but who knows where the madness will go from there. Over the course of the Resident Evil series, there have been several different viruses. There's the original T virus, as well as G virus, the C virus, and the A virus. But there have also been variants of these. Code Veronica gave us the T Veronica variant, which was then expanded on in the Darkside Chronicles spin-off. Resident Evil Revelations introduced the T Abyss virus, an aquatic mutation of the T virus that transformed those infected with it into ooze life forms. Ooze are characterized by and named after the slimy substance they secrete. The T Abyss virus may be frightening, but the version of the virus that our heroes are facing in Death Island is even worse. In the trailer, when Chris, Jill, and Claire first meet the zombies on Alcatraz, Chris says they turn fast and without being bitten. We don't have all the details yet, but the version of the T virus infecting the zombies on Alcatraz is not spread through bites like previous variants. It's airborne. The trailer depicts it being spread through the air as purple particles. It isn't certain where exactly the virus first came from, but it isn't limited to bites anymore. That makes it much more powerful and much more dangerous. Speaking of Claire, Rebecca, and Jill, how do they still look so young? It's been 17 years since Jill's first appearance in Resident Evil, and quite some time since Rebecca and Claire first showed up on the screen. What sort of Faustian bargains or 10-step skincare routines are they engaging in to look so young? Well, it turns out that their beauty secret is none of the above. Instead, it's the three women's previous exposures to some sort of virus. Jill was infected with the T virus during the destruction of Raccoon City. Rebecca was infected with the A virus when Glenn Arias took her captive. And Claire was infected with the T Phobos virus while kidnapped by Alex Wesker. For some reason, this anti-aging property only seems to have affected some of the characters, but hey, some folks have all the luck when it comes to deadly mutant viruses. There is one shot in the trailer that has fans buzzing more than any other, admittedly epic moment, and that's the shot of all the series' previous protagonists, including Leon, Jill, Claire and Chris Redfield, and Rebecca Chambers all joining together, guns drawn, ready to take on the threat as one. It's the ultimate crossover event, a team-up of beloved characters who have each faced off against the threats of zombies, biological warfare, and human evil in their own stories, all coming together to battle mutant sharks and underwater lickers on a prison island. What do you think we'll see in Resident Evil Death Island? Let us know down there in the comments.